Okay, we'll make a start. Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our partners and guests who've joined us from Northumberland, Sunderland, Orange Bus and MHCLG today. Gateshead Council extends you a very warm welcome. Glad you could make it this morning. So my name is Roger Abbott. I'm the Digital Services Manager here at Gateshead Council and project lead for our Discovery project, taxi licensing, fixing complexity, inefficiency and risk. And I'm joined by Tasmin Hardy, Licensing Manager at Northumberland County Council. Find it hard to believe that it's actually only the beginning of December when we were one of the 16 lucky projects who have been awarded funding by MHCLG, and a lot has happened in a very short space of time. In fact, on the 13th of December was our first kick-off meeting with the other 15 funded projects, and the complexity of the project really hit home when Government Digital Service informed us that they'd tried to look at this issue in 2016 and actually decided, no, this one was a bit too difficult for the time being. So they were quite happy for Gateshead Council and partners to take this one on. And it's probably true to say that that was a good reflection on the scope of the project. It is complex, and we'll learn about that in today's presentation. And from that short space of time, it was only 5 weeks from that original meeting in London that we procured the services of Orange Bus via the digital marketplace. And we really hit the ground running. It was the 21st of January that we had our first kick-off workshop with Orange Bus. So that's only 10 weeks ago. And I've just been told today that of the 10 funded discovery projects, we're one of only 2 to have met the original deadline of this Friday. So massive thanks and congratulations to the team to hit that very challenging timeline. So today, after my introduction, I'm going to be handing over to Craig Priestman of Orange Bus and the team, who are going to go through the full discovery session and go through the user research report and findings in detail. And he's going to invite various other members of the team along to input into that. At the end, 11:45, we're going to have a questions and answer session. I'd really welcome as much contribution as possible from anyone who has any questions around the project. We're going to take lunch, and for those project members who are able to stay, we're going to look at what quick wins we can achieve immediately after this project. We're going to assign roles, and we're also going to have a retrospective to see what went well, what didn't go so well, what would we do better next time. So obviously, all project team members who have been involved, I would welcome you to stay through till 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I mentioned the kick-off workshop on the 21st of January. One of the key exercises we did, we got into groups and worked out what our mission statement was going to be. And I thought it was really indicative of the collaboration and consensus that was important from this project at the outset, because, to be honest, people do have different ideas, but in the way that we developed this, I think we sort of nailed what the mission of this project would be. And that's the purpose of the taxi licensing project, is to provide a digital standardised application process for all applicants that is accessible, lawful, efficient and scalable, so that we continue to protect the public so that they can travel safely. I think that's really where I'd like to introduce you to Tasmin Hardy, Licensing Manager at Northumberland Council, to say a few words about why the purpose of this project is so important.
First of all, I have to apologise. Hay fever has kicked in, and hopefully my voice will last for the few minutes I'm speaking today. In licensing, public safety is our main concern, and if you look at the news over the last couple of years, that has become very evident. The taxi trade take our most vulnerable members of society. They often have them on their own. They can create relationships with them, and you just have to look at some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Examples of where this has gone wrong. Look at Rotherham, look at Rochdale, you look at Warboys recently, which is back in the press. One taxi driver was able to create a situation in which he had 19 victims for which he was prosecuted. These are our most vulnerable people, and we need to make sure we protect them. This project, although it is looking at those that are maybe not so much a risk to society, we need to make sure that we are protecting them as well. think my voice is about to go. So if it's all right with you, Roger,
Yes.
I'll just put you back.
Thank you, Tasford. So the bulk of today's presentation is going to be going through the user research and the findings. And I think it's fair to say that we really challenged some assumptions, and it really shows the value of doing upfront user research. And so I'm going to hand over to Craig Priestman, Orange Bus, who will run through the Discovery project in more detail with you.
Thank you. Right, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. So what I'm going to do for the next maybe 45 minutes or so is just run through a very high level what we've learned over the last 10 weeks and also our approach to that and working agile, working collaborative with the councils and to try and get across a few of the key findings that, you know, like Roger was saying there, the assumptions that we challenged, as well as the new insights that we learned from that. I'm conscious, well, I'm sure you'll have lots of questions at the end, so I will try and rattle through as much information as I can, but feel free to ask at the end or over lunch if you've got any like burning insights that you'd like to get as well. Okay. So the service today, we've kind of like tried to summarise exactly what we've figured out in the last 10 weeks. So the current tax licence and process are heavily paper-based, using a wide variety of systems. They rely on multiple touch points face-to-face, and the taxi drivers and the applicants themselves perceive the service as not very good value for money. So through the project, we've spoken to applicants, both taxi drivers and operators, and also the council staff. When we spoke to the applicants, we've pulled out a little quote from them to say a lot of their pain points were around the time it takes and the fact that the process seems quite out of date, a bit old-fashioned, and why is it not actually a digital process at the minute. They were very vocal with frustrations and thought they shared their opinions on how the process could be improved. And across the 3 different councils, there was obviously varied opinions, as you may imagine, within the differences and the similarities that we picked up. However, themes did emerge across all 3 councils, such as the time, the desire for digital service, and the desire for an improved communications between them and the council staff. Moving on to the council staff and the employees we spoke to, so we kind of embedded ourselves within the licensing team and asked them to contribute as much as they could as well and get an insight into how they worked and their pain points and frustrations. And understand the similarities and differences between each council. And we learned quite a lot actually from doing that, from shadowing the council licensing team, understanding what systems they use. And this was a nice quote from Northumberland to say how, you know, until we actually broke down exactly what the process is and looked at it from, you know, a bird's eye view, they didn't actually understand how many pieces of software and the different systems they use that didn't actually work together. And I think that's almost a generalised theme across the board as well. The fact that the system's been adapted and changed so much over time that it's not always the case where you fully understand what software is in place and what the systems and processes are. So another point that we did, we obviously collected the qualitative data but also the quantitative data as well. So we picked up some metrics. These are just some average numbers that all 3 councils have contributed to kind of give a sense of, you know, what the current service looks like now, and this is almost a benchmark of going forward. How can we improve on this? Some of the key points to pick out were around the length that an application process can take. So just for a new taxi driver application, you can see there at the bottom it was around 6 weeks. However, that does vary, you know, quite dramatically. We did talk to people who had applications done within 2 weeks compared to people who can take almost 3.5 months to get their application through. So a lot, like relating back to what Roger was saying before, we challenged a lot of the assumptions, and very early on we were questioning whether there was actually a need for a digital solution and what would be the uptake if there were a digital process in place. So one of the main questions was, is there a need for a digital service? And the answer for that is yes. There is a clear desire for a simple and efficient process from the applicants and also the council licensing team across the board. When we say simple and efficient, when we've been talking to applicants, they actually brought up their belief that it should already be like that anyway, and they're also related to other gov.uk processes such as applying for a new passport and questioned why is the process for a taxi licence application not as simple as doing that. Another point for that as well is the fact that if even though there is a need for a digital service, there was obviously the questions around digital literacy, and we learned quite a lot from the applicants that literacy does vary a lot between people who have, multiple forms of technology and are very capable, compared to others who maybe just used a normal telephone just to make phone calls and never actually accessed the internet themselves without the support of others. So the questions were around about as well of what assistance would be provided if the service was digital. And I think it's also worth mentioning that both the licensing team and the operators said they would be able to provide assistance and support to them who need it the most, and especially the larger operators said that they would be more than willing to offer that support if that meant that a digital service was on the horizon. So as you can gather from what we've learned as well, as we've been going through, we've also learned the potential benefits and the impact that a digital process could have, and even just an improved service itself. So we've got there from the reduced number of phone calls, reduced paper and admin required. The potential for errors would hopefully decrease as there'd be less opportunity for human error, and hopefully the application time would drop dramatically. Overall, then that would just improve the customer experience and improve the applicant's point of view and the process they take, and then also reduce the complexity and improve the efficiency of the project. We also picked up on some of the potential indirect benefits, and you can see how these vary quite dramatically as well. So you've got that encourage the digital life skills, like I talked about, the digital literacy, but then complete the other end of it, the better collection of data and how that can be used internally as well. As you can see in the centre there, we've got one around the people or the licensing team are freed up to be more proactive about public safety, which again is really the core of this project and then one of the key purposes like Tasman was talking about. So we did pick up on a lot on that, and we actually got a spreadsheet of quite a lot of different benefits, which I will pick up on later on in the presentation. However, we also identified the challenges if we were to create this digital service and an improved process, the challenges and the barriers that we'd have to come across. A key one was standardisation. So as you can imagine with the 3 different councils, although you obviously all follow the same legislation, you've got your different policies, the different software and systems in place, and also the different roles and responsibilities within each licensing team. Now that might not sound like it's a big factor, but we kind of learned that it probably is, because in each licensing team, the members involved can vary between one person going through the process with an applicant to maybe 2 or 3 people being involved at different stages and at different levels of responsibility. Like I said before as well, although you all follow us in the same legislation, we've got the specifications and policies that would have to be standardised, so that would reduce the frustration and pain point for applicants and make the clarity for the internal team much easier. Digital inclusion would be a massive factor in this as well, understanding the confidence of the applicants as well as the licensing team if they have to use new systems and software, and obviously that user compliance. What would the uptake really be like if we were to offer a digital platform? The infrastructure and network is obviously another key point. You're saying there about the resource and skills and upskilling staff, or again, or even upskilling the operators and the applicants themselves. And then another challenge would actually just be the collaboration. If this is to be something that was rolled out on a national scale and standardised across the board, working collaboratively between everyone, that would be a huge challenge and a barrier that is definitely something that we can knock down, but it would be something that would take a lot of work and a lot of effort from everyone involved. So off the back of what we learned, we've got our concluding research is basically our recommendation of going forward. And that is more of a second, more focused discovery, which will explore just the new driver application process. Whereas what we've been doing in the last 10 weeks, we have quite a wide scope for the project, looking at all the different processes involved from the licensing team and the applicant's point of view, trying to understand exactly what's currently involved. And that's kind of led us on a lot of different directions, and we haven't even covered everything. We've almost just scratched the surface of that, really. So what we're saying here going forward for the second discovery is just understanding one particular service and the feasibility of how that could work and what that could look like. Providing a discovery that is a success, we would then move on to an alpha phase and experiment with standardising the service on a small scale first, then with the idea of going national. However, in the meantime, before that gets underway, we have also identified objectives or tasks that could be done in the near future. And I'll quickly run through each of these and provide a bit of background on them. So we've got the upskill of the content design strategy. It was a very clear pain point and frustration across the board around how the content that's currently available for applicants is not sufficient, and the fact that even the councils and licensing team appreciated that and felt like that an upskilling opportunity would be there for internally for them to learn more and understand exactly how best to communicate with the applicants. So leading into a joint content review and rewrite. So when we say joint, I mean across all the councils involved, and if that means requiring upskilling as well, we've got that factor involved. We've got the learning from each other using the journey maps. So you can see around the room, we've got the journey maps pinned up. I'll go into a little bit more detail about them, but the fact that it would be really good for each council to kind of understand each other's processes involved, the similarities and differences, and try and learn from one another what works and what doesn't work, and what could work for you and what wouldn't work for you, to understand that feasibility going forward. Also showcasing what you have learned so far, so like we're doing right now internally, but also to the wider proportion of stakeholders to get their engagement going forward, and then obviously nationally as well to show what we're doing right now and the benefits of that. And then that will all kind of feed into the last point of just the local improvements to internal process. So there's obviously little quick wins that we could go for, and understanding what they actually are and how the impact they could have. And so I've just put a few examples there, like the example of the safeguarding Gateshead, bringing that internally and trying to do that a little bit differently, and then also just working in a very agile manner and working collaboratively together to kind of make these improvements. I'm not sure if everyone's got it on the desk, but there should be a one-page summary that kind of is everything I've just kind of spoke about there, which is yours free to take away. Kind of keep that in your back pocket, and something that you can pin back to if you need to. And this covers basically exactly what I've just kind of covered there. What I'm going to do now is do a quick walkthrough of the actual activities that we conducted, and how we basically got to our conclusions. So actually, as you can see, this is a visual of basically the roadmap of the last 10 weeks. You probably might not be able to read the actual titles from that, but we have got printouts that you can look at later. And these just cover each, there's about 14 different activities there, and these range from very early on, we did the kick-off workshop, through the shadowing and the focus groups with operators and applicants, and then also doing the interviews with them and further workshops with each council to understand their process and their journey, and also the co-design and service scope workshops towards the back end of the project, which highlighted the potential ideas going forward and what the feasibility of them actually are. One thing that this visual doesn't really represent is the fact that this was an agile project. I guess this is very almost linear, and it shows how smooth it all is, but really what really happened, it was much more, it should be much more squiggle and going all over the place, because we had to adapt quite a lot. We did have other activities planned where we wanted to talk to taxi drivers and get them in and to do workshops with them and get their ideas down, but there wasn't really much uptake in that. They weren't really keen to come into the council to talk about their own ideas as well, so that was something we had to scrap. And there was also a bit challenging getting hold of applicants who were going through the process as we speak from end to end. So that's something else that we need to pick up on going forward. This is a little discovery time lapse, it's just a minute long. So that time lapse kind of just gives you a flavour of what we've been up to the last 10 weeks and all the different places we've been to, all the different people we've spoken to. And what I've got now on the next slide is to do with what the councils actually said around this. So we gathered the feedback from the different workshops and the different activities, and this kind of gives you an insight into the upskilling that has gone on through this project and the working agile and the benefits of doing so, of working together collaboratively as well, how we've learned from each other and passed on new skills. So what I want to do now actually is invite Helen Davison from Northumberland, Anthony Gallagher from Gateshead and Carol Thirlwell from Sunderland to come up and talk just for 2 minutes around the activities that they took part in and to share what they did and what we learned from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. As Craig said, I'm Helen Davison from Northumberland. What we did, I'm just here to talk about the user research. We did a few things at Northumberland. We did shadowing, so we got firsthand to see what the taxi staff, the employees, do through the application process, and what systems they actually use, and any internal pain points that the staff might have. For us as working in information services at Northumberland, it gave us a real good opportunity to talk to the staff, to find out what the pain points were, and also to talk to the fleet staff who deal with the car side of things, like the vehicles, but also talk to the taxi drivers. So that's what we did. We did one-to-one interviews at our Stake 4 depot, which is one of the main touch points of the journey. We interviewed a number of drivers who were renewing their licence and renewing their vehicle licence. So we asked them how they applied, did they understand the process, what was their digital appetite and their digital literacy, what technology they currently use in the car, in the vehicle, and also in the office. Any ideas how they thought that we could make it better, and how did they feel about public safety? We then we did one-to-one interviews with operators. So we looked at what motivates them, what the barriers are, what their attitudes are with their process and how they manage their fleet. There's one particular operator who works with all 3 of our councils. So a team went out and spoke to those individually. So we asked them if they would be involved in any sort of testing when we go forward, so we can continually learn about the process and continually improve it. How digital was the business, what technology did they currently use, and we learned as well about the different, how the different 3 councils did their licensing process differently, just talking to this one operator. At Northumberland, we also had a good opportunity to talk to our fleet mechanic to find out that part of the journey and any pain points they had as well. Not only did we shadowed the licensing staff, we talked to them individually and as groups just to get their perspectives of their roles and any pain points through their process. Why did we do this? What's the importance of user research? Well, this was a discovery project, so we're there to find out who our likely users are and what they're trying to do. What is their current problem? What channels do they use? What services do they use? Any problems or frustrations that's part of this experience? And also, what are the users trying to do when they use our service? So this allowed us as a council to move away from making decisions based on assumptions. So we find out what works, not what's popular. Think about users in terms of real people, get their real experiences, empathise with them. Also, as providers, we can then know what service features work, what they want to use, what's important of delivering a value service. And it also enabled us to understand if there was any, because everyone's different, so what individual needs that people different might have, what are the different abilities, and what any barriers were that they may face in that environment. So what did we learn from doing this process? Well, without it, we wouldn't know what the problem was, so we need to talk to the user. We need to understand the problems to enable us to solve them, and just to create a service that works well for the user. We also learned that user needs are completely different to what the user wants, so that was interesting. User research, you have to do it as a team rather than just as an individual. So everyone across the whole project has to be involved to understand what the needs are. We also learned that it was important to include our stakeholders. So this is why we spoke to our fleet mechanic to understand their part of the process. And another thing that we learned, we need buy-in from our organisation to enable us to work in an agile way. As Craig mentioned before, it was quite fluid, the way that we worked rather than a linear process. So I just want to conclude my bit of the presentation. It's better to understand your users because you're more likely to design a service or a system that works well for them with fewer errors, and hopefully you'll get more of a digital uptake. Thank you.
Yep. So we at Gateshead focused on looking at some surveys. We had a number of different workshops. We discussed a number of different assumptions in terms of what we thought the problem was. We knew what the problem was within Gateshead, Northumberland and Sunderland, but we didn't know whether the wider audience throughout the UK had the same issues. So we decided to create two surveys, one for local authorities, to understand if they had the same issues that we have, but also taxi service users, to understand what safety meant to them, and also a little bit of data around the use of taxi services. So firstly, I'll talk about the local authority survey. So we were on a very tight schedule, so we decided that we had a week to get a survey out and to get as many local authorities to fill in the survey as possible, within a week to get that data back, to analyse it. So we thought we'll be happy if we get half a dozen. So we fired it out. We used channels through EGLE, MHCLG, Twitter, Facebook, used Slack channel on Local Gov Digital. I had a contact from Durham who fired it out regionally, and I had a contact through LGA who sent it nationally. So we got 98 local authorities within a week who look after a population of over 18.5 million residents throughout the UK. So that shows to me that there's a massive need of, it's significant in terms of the buy-in for change for this particular service, in huge interest for the digitalisation of the project. We sent out the questionnaire because we wanted to understand the paper-based systems in place, the ratio of paper-based compared to digital, the appetite for a full end-to-end digital solution, how service users currently contacted licensed authorities such as telephone, face-to-face, email, digital, etc. The number of systems used, what systems are being used, the cost of the systems, when they were due to be renewed, just to basically understand where we would need to go next in terms of, a solution, here's a solution, but what do we need to do in terms of all the other elements and factors involved to take it from A to B. We also sent out a resident survey for taxi service users through our citizens panel, but we also use social media. We wanted to understand how often people use taxis, what they use them for, but most importantly, what safety meant to them, what would reassure them, coming back to the point made by Tasmin, what would reassure taxi service users that they were safe whilst using taxi services. So to create the surveys, we obviously made quite a few assumptions initially in many different workshops. So we sat down, decided on what information we actually would need to add value to the qualitative work that was being done, to confirm assumptions or oppose those assumptions. And we established a number of questions for both surveys. We worked with Matt and David from our research and intelligence team to refine them. We got feedback from Northumberland and Sunderland in terms of the what questions, how to phrase them, to word them, open, closed, probing in particular areas. And collectively we were happy, we sent it out, and as I said, we got that great response. So we've got all this information, all this data through, and we needed to analyse it. So what we decided to do was to use Power BI, and we have produced 2 sort of nice visual reports that you can access. I don't know if the link should be sent around to everybody who's been invited, so they can have a look at that data, because I'm not going to go into any stats today. But what have we learned? We've learned that there's a significant amount of interest, which means there's huge potential for change, because there's a lot of buy-in, there's a lot of people interested in this project nationally. We learned that it will be very difficult to scale nationally and to basically find a solution. That's why we need a second discovery. But this project's been so complex because it's a national project. It's not just about delivering something for Gateshead, it's about the whole nation. We learn that there's little to no standardisation across local authorities in terms of systems, contact channels, etc. And we learned that a lot can be delivered in a short space of time if everybody mucks in and just gets on with it. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Carol, would you like to come up and talk about?
Hi, so the week after our kick-off meeting, our licensing manager in Sunderland was having a forum with some of the drivers and operators who work in Sunderland, and they agreed that they would stay behind and have a focus group. So Craig came along and we shadowed him doing that, and straight away we talked about assumptions, and the drivers quickly told us that our assumptions were incorrect, especially surrounding digital. The licensing team are very, very traditional and had always said no, the drivers wouldn't be on board with that, and that's one of the first things that we took away from that. Craig went on for the rest of the day to shadow everybody who's involved in the process in Sunderland, and it just showed how complex the process has been made because there's so many touch points throughout that. It's been key, and what Helen said, a lot of, we've found the same, that we've learned so much through the process as to how it can be improved. Our taxi drivers were hugely vocal on where they could see improvements. Like you said, with the passports, you can take a photograph as part of the passport process. Why can you not do that as part of the taxi licence process? They want to be able to upload documents. They're very, very keen to be on board with digital. It has just been key having the user research and the quotes to take forward to stakeholders, because we know that there's appetite for change, but actually listening to the drivers and having the feedback and the quotes from them is what's going to get the buy-in from the stakeholders. The appetite's out there, and we need to make sure that they understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So what we've got next, so yeah, off the back of all them activities, as we've been going along, we've tried to document as much as we can. Like you said, with the time-lapse video, we've tried to take photographs and videos, but with the interviews, we also try to capture a lot of the conversations we had with the applicants and the operators. So I'm just going to play this video. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long, but it gives you a real good insight into the type of impact that we were getting and the insights that we were gathering from the applicants.
Had invested and had like a modern website where you could like put in like submission for driver application or car vehicle application. I'm sure in this day and age you could like submit your form and then it bounces straight back a form saying like please fill this in and send it back and we'll process it for you. And then that would be just so much easier, and it's all up to date, it's done there and then. And I think technology, that's where the world's going, and people prefer just dealing with things on the phone or the laptop, doing it all.
I mean, don't get us wrong, all your old school drivers will just be like, what the hell are you doing to us? You're trying to make us use a computer. I've never used one in 20 years. But I just think as a company, it would be so much easier. Some of the drivers doing it themselves might not find it that way.
I'm quite happy for it to go paperless. Obviously all of this here, for me, it's just a waste of paper. that could be all sent to me in an email. Yep, I could print it off and I could have it at home without all of the carry on here with that. That could all be sent to me via an email. But there's drivers there who's going to turn around and say it's no good to me. I don't have a computer, I don't have a scanner, I don't have a printer, I don't have any of this. So you're still going to get that. But I think that's the way forward. Like,
you do it online, it would just like, oh, we need this, oh, we need that. The process just wouldn't. I prefer to deal with a person rather than online. That's just my preference.
But it's absolutely scary. It's so scary to think these people just come and they get a taxi badge, they don't know what side of the road they're driving on, and they can't communicate with the passenger.
I would say we turn 10 drivers a week away because they're just shocking.
Really?
And I'd scratch my head to think they've got a taxi.
The first and foremost thing of a bus driver and a taxi driver, because you're carrying public, is the absolutely safety and comfort of your passenger. That goes without saying.
Yeah.
But obviously, if someone's never been caught for anything, they're not on the police system, and they could still be a harm to people. Yeah. Same with enforcement, full stop. I sometimes ring taxi licence and with driver's details when I see an unlicensed car running around picking people up.
So I know it's not going to happen overnight, but it would be nice if things could be standardised across the board so everybody expected the same things.
Even if you get your DBS and you've passed your taxi test, sometimes you might not actually be eligible for a badge, but they've still took the money off you for that taxi test. So if you've done it this way, you wouldn't be paying the money for the taxi test. All you would have lost out on is the DBS. I just think that they should be able to do the DBS first and then do the taxi test afterwards.
It's hard. One lad lived in Whitfield. It was 100 miles from his house to Stakeford. He had an appointment up there. When he got there, he was 10 minutes late, and they said come back tomorrow, which was horrendous. Like, and I had to go back the next day. It's 400 miles just to hand a piece of paperwork.
It's very much just a handful of some of the insights that we gathered. Hopefully I hope you found that interesting to kind of hear it from the mouths themselves, to understand the frustration. You can actually feel the frustration coming through from them. But that was only, I guess, again, scratching the surface. These are other themes that we kind of picked up off, and we identified these off the back of during the discovery, going through all the research, gathering all the insights, and synthesizing the data and trying to group that into understandable themes that we can action going forward. So I'm not going to talk about all of them, but just a few to pick out. Rating the communications at the top there was a pain point across the board from applicants' point of view of not gathering enough information at the beginning of the process. And the licensing teams also felt that if we managed to provide information, the correct information at the right stage of the journey at the beginning, it would make the process a lot smoother for both parties involved as the process went along. As we talked about, obviously the digital appetite from both the applicants and the licensing team is a massive theme throughout. And then also the council's appetite for change as well, where we obviously not only got the pain points from the operators and applicants, but also the licensing team and the challenges that they face on a daily basis, where they want that reliable system that they can trust and feel confident using, instead of having to go through having all these own little hacks on a daily basis, just to taking screenshots and doing all this and using these different integrated systems that aren't really built for the job. Another key point was around the perceived unfairness within the system. There's a lot of questions were raised from applicants around why they had to do certain tasks, because again the communication was lacking. They didn't understand exactly what was required of them, and also the fact that the value for money kind of fed into that as well, and them not really fully understanding where that money was going and what their licensing fee was contributing to. And obviously another massive point was the safety. We talked a lot with the taxi drivers around obviously the public safety and the fact of having maybe CCTV in cars, but then obviously a lot of the shift focused to their own safety. The fact that on taxi ranks they're not necessarily always safe. They always often feel that the drivers get overlooked on their safety, and the fact that they are carrying passengers and members of the public, and that puts their safety into question as well. That's not always looked into enough detail. So the main pain points, I just kind of picked out a few. I mentioned before on the time, just the overall process time it takes to get an application from the end-to-end process. That was a massive frustration for people involved. Limited resource available to support the service, so that's from both the applicant's point of view, that they're not feeling that they were getting the treatment that they deserved. I guess that perceived unfairness of the value for money, and also from the licensing team, where there's just maybe not enough members within the team to effectively do their jobs. There's that requirement for the multiple face-to-face meetings and interviews, and I guess that goes back to that comment there in the video where one of the drivers had to travel 100 miles just to drop in a piece of paper. That face-to-face communication, when is it really necessary? Obviously, it is necessary points where you want to establish that fit and proper perspective of someone. Rightfully, should they be a driver? But obviously, can there be something where you send a photograph or a form of another part of the process via email instead? The complex language that's used throughout the process on forms, or whether that's online as well, can make the service quite difficult to understand, and that leads back to the communication aspect. And then the making payments for the licensing fee, that causes additional delays, because sometimes you can't always make the payment you want whilst you're at the council office. If you want to pay by cash, you might have to go to a cashier desk instead. If you want to pay by card, you can do, but it's not 100% reliable. So this just adds on to the time, and it just builds frustration in the process. So as you can see around the room, we've got the journey maps that these are actually what we class as like the service blueprint, and these were established with each of the councils. We did a workshop individually with each council for a day, where we just got 1 million post-it notes, and we kind of questioned from the user's point of view what the process is for getting a new application for a taxi licence and also a vehicle licence as well. And as you can see, we've pulled out the steps, and we've got like the line to show the emotions and their journey throughout the process, but then obviously the actions and the pain points that I've kind of mentioned. And then we've got some nice quotes in there as well to kind of bring that to life. But what you can see beneath the top, the second half of it, is actually like the backstage process. And that's from the council's perspective of what tasks and activities they have to do to make sure that this process can be seen out and end to end. So what we did with that, once we kind of gathered everyone's input, and gathered the 3 different councils, we kind of reviewed them and then got all the councils back together to do a bit of a co-design session and understand the what we class as the moments that matter. So the moments that we feel like going forward were the ones that were the real pain points and the real areas that needed the most improvement, and that would also have the most impact on a new process. So I've just listed these moments that matter for both the driver licence and the vehicle licence. You can see there that the first ones are all around that first contact, the first communication with the applicant, and then receiving the actual application pack as well as another key one. So that the communication piece, getting all the information, how they do that, cutting down on time, delays of postage, could it be sent digitally instead? And then we've got completing the knowledge test and getting the results was a key pain point, as well as the attending the CSE course. So the child sexual exploitation course that Northumberland and Gateshead run. For the vehicle licence, very similar to the driver licence for the first contact and completing the pack, really getting that information. But then we've got around the booking appointments, booking their vehicle test, the actual vehicle test itself, and then receiving the licence at the end, getting your plates for your vehicle. What we also established through this discovery were the user needs. So Helen kindly mentioned them a little bit earlier in her piece around, the user needs aren't what the user necessarily wants, it's what the user needs to do to complete that process. So understanding user needs is vital to actually delivering services that people want to use and can use. Needs can be the practical or functional tasks. And they also include like emotional factors and the, like we said about the need and more confidence and reassurance going through. To achieve, a quality service with greater uptake and fewer inaccuracies by design, you need to design with the user needs in mind. So you actually see an example here where we created, we used the 3 different perspectives from an applicant, an operator and the council licensing team, because we understood that their needs varied throughout the process. And one of the examples is from someone actually applying for a license. This is kind of the way we'd write it from, as someone applying for a license, I need the application process to be simple and efficient so that I don't need to be an expert to use it. That's quite a high level one, but we obviously went into a lot more detail around certain aspects and around them moments that matter as well. What we will provide at the end of the day is we've got a nice little key ring of the user needs that relating to the moments that matter as well, as a little bit of a handout. So going forward that you guys can actually refer to these user needs for whatever you end up doing, any of the improvements that you make, that you should always be referring back to these so that you actually are taking on board exactly what the applicants, the operators and the users of your system and the services you use, so you actually make the most benefit of it and you are going down the right direction. So another, with them user needs in mind, in part of this like co-design session and the service scope sessions we ran, we did some ideation and trying to understand, what is a priority with these moments that matter, what could be done to improve these services. And I've kind of got a list here of there should be 8, but it just kind of cuts off the bottom there. But these seven ideas were then prioritised, and we did a bit of a group voting activity where people could, if they had X amount of money, where would you place your money on what idea you think should be most important and prioritise first. So you see the top 3, you've got the online bookings and the digital application process, that opportunity to do it, and then just that content to support it again. So then 3 that have been running throughout the discovery, and I try to highlight today as well. But then obviously we've got the other ideas around, that shared vehicle database, and that'd be like roll out nationally so that the specifications and policies can be uniform. And the digital knowledge and locality test, and maybe reviewing that process as it is at the minute and how that can be changed. In-house child sexual exploitation course came up quite a lot. And we've got the 2 more points around making, it easier to provide licenses and that more especially for the vehicle, and that more flexibility around doing a vehicle test as well. And we felt like that was something that should be prioritised. Off the back of them ideas and the prioritisation, we established the benefits that would come from running these different ideas and activities and improving the service. And as we've kind of gone through the projects, we've established these benefits and defined them into these little categories on the left-hand side. So you've got, your economy, the quality of service, internal management, process improvement, HR management, risk reduction and policy. So all the benefits kind of feed into them some way or another. And what we've done with each benefit then is categorised it between, is it measurable? Can someone pick this up and use it as a benchmark going forward? Is it an indirect benefit of the project? That's something, it may not happen. And then you've got the disbenefits as well. So it's obviously worth mentioning, if we do create a digital process, what's the impact that has negatively as well. We need to understand the challenges that would bring. I think it's also worth mentioning at this point as well, we ran some process mapping sessions with each council, so that not really like the user journey maps, not from a user point of view, but from an internal process point of view of looking at every stage involved and what that stage meant and the directions that could go off it. To try and upskill a team and understand from the licensing team's point of view what processes are involved currently. So earlier I mentioned about the spreadsheet of benefits. This is kind of just almost like a screen grab of just all the benefits that we identified. I obviously don't expect you to read through them all right now, but the reason I've presented it like this is to show that there's actually a vast number of benefits that can be established from this project. It's not just 1 or 2 where you've got that key one. Obviously, there's ones that are larger than others, but the fact that you've got so many measurable benefits down the side, and then so many indirect benefits. It's quite interesting, I think, from that point of view, to understand this project and the scale it has and the potential it has. And these are the disbenefits that I was talking about there of the job satisfaction, changing process. What would the impact be on that? So just to kind of summarise, these are just the key takeaways to take away from today. The current service is inefficient, pay-to-base, like mentioned. There's a need for a digital service. There's actually a need there for it. Those involved desire that standardised, uniformed digital solution. There's a range of benefits the council can measure, so going forward, the benchmarking, and then obviously the challenges around that standardisation, digital inclusion and infrastructure. So that kind of brings a close to my pitch around the user research. I would really encourage everyone to look through the journey maps. I know some of you already have, but for those who haven't, I think it'd be really valuable for you to look at each of the councils. I also have some print-offs here from the different aspects of the research, from the standardisation. We've got some information about the taxi drivers we spoke to, a bit more detail that I'll spread out on the table so you can all have a look at that. But I guess thank you very much, and if you've got any questions, I guess now is the opportunity to ask me. I'm going to hand over to Roger just to kind of finish up, and then I'll be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And I think everyone can appreciate the huge amount of work the team has put into delivering this to timescale, and that's the contribution of the entire project team. So I've really got to thank everybody for all the hard work that went into this, and clearly identified a very strong need for digital improvement. It's a heavily paper-based process, and there's a real appetite from both users and internally in councils to improve. I think what also wider than this project itself, I think what's been fantastic is the unprecedented levels of collaboration and partnership working that I've not previously seen in the local government digital sector. It really has fired up a lot of passion for improvement and standardisation across organisations. So that's been something that we've really, we can really see that there's a real step change in looking at how local government might be dealing with digital going forward. But I think from a national point of view, we also need national policy. We need better national policy on databases of taxi drivers, of vehicle licensing, and at the moment it is quite fragmented. So it's not just down to local government, it'll be local government working with national government to actually make those improvements.